When I knocked on the door of our Leningrad apartment in the fall of 1985, my mother opened it, looked at me, and collapsed right there on the threshold. She didn't recognize me. I was standing there wearing a Chukchi reindeer skin kuklianka, a traditional Chukotka cloak. My hair was braided into 2 braids, according to local custom. My skin was chapped and darkened by the polar sun. Behind me stood Ainana, my husband, in traditional fur clothing, with the face of a true Chukchi. And next to me stood 3 children with slanted eyes and dark skin, speaking broken Russian. When my mother came to and peered into my face, she screamed so loudly that all the neighbors came running. Her daughter Anya, Dr. Anna Gromova, had officially died 8 years earlier in Porga, somewhere in Chukotka. She was awarded a medal posthumously, a funeral was held, and she was removed from the list of living. And now this dead daughter stood on the threshold with someone else's family, looking at them with eyes that held enough pain to last several lifetimes. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your opinion in the comments. Let's get started. But it all started very differently. June 1976, Leningrad, graduation from the medical faculty. I stood in the assembly hall with a diploma with honors in my hands and thought that my whole life was ahead of me. I was 24. I was the best student in my surgery course. My fiancé, Maxim, is an engineer at the Kirov plant. We were planning a wedding for next summer. My mother is proud of me. My father, although he died 3 years ago, would probably be proud too. I am young, beautiful, talented. It seems to me that the world lies at my feet. And then they announced the assignments. It was the moment everyone was dreading. The mandatory job assignment system after graduation meant you could be sent anywhere, to a village near Pskov, to the far east, to Central Asia. You couldn't refuse, or you wouldn't get a diploma. All 6 years of study would be wasted. I stood and listened as the names were read out. Some were sent to Murmansk, some to Kazakhstan, and a few lucky ones were left in Leningrad. Anna Petrovna Gromova, Chukotka Autonomous Okrug, Yulin Village. General practitioner. 3-year term. It took me a while to realize it was about me. Chukotka at Helen's. I didn't even know where it was. That evening I came home, got out the atlas, and found Chukotka at the very edge of the map, where the USSR meets the Bering Strait. And Yulin turned out to be a tiny dot on the cape itself, the easternmost point of the Soviet Union. Beyond that, there was only ocean in America. I looked at that spot and felt a chill run down my spine. Maxim was furious. We were sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea, and he was pacing, waving his arms. Anya, this is a mockery. 3 years at the end of the world. There's the polar night, bears, and who knows what else. I'll file a complaint. We'll get a reassignment. But I already knew that complaints wouldn't help. You can't cheat the system. If you're given a referral, you're going. The only way to avoid reassignment is to get married before graduation and move to where your husband lives. But Maxim and I didn't have time. We were planning a wedding for next year. I tried to console him and myself. Maxim, it's only 3 years. I'll work it out, come back, and we'll get married. Think of the experience I'll gain. Working with indigenous people, extreme medicine, it's unique. He didn't listen. He suggested not running away, not leaving, giving up my diploma, finding some kind of job without a higher education. But I couldn't. 6 years of study, dreams of a career as a surgeon. All of this couldn't just disappear. I thought then that 3 years wasn't that long, that I could endure it, that I would come back. How wrong I was. The last month before leaving was like a fog. Mom silently packed my suitcase, putting away warm clothes, knitted sweaters, woolen socks. She cried at night. I heard it through the wall. Maxim came every evening. We walked around the city, along the Neva embankment, looked at the drawbridges, and I remembered every detail, every pavement stone. It seemed to me that I had to absorb this city so that later, there at the end of the world, I could retrieve these memories and warm myself with them. Just before leaving, Maxim gave me a gold ring. Wear it, remember me. In 3 years, I'll put an engagement ring on you. You'll see. I slipped the ring onto the ring finger of my right hand and promised to wear it without taking it off. I didn't know that 8 years later, that ring would be lying somewhere at the bottom of the Bering Strait. lost in the blizzard that killed one Anna Gromova and gave birth to another. Our entire group of assignment recipients, about 15 of us, had gathered at Pulkovo Airport, all headed to different parts of the country. I was flying alone, the others to other cities. Mom held my hand and didn't let go until they announced boarding. When I turned around for the last time before walking onto the runway, I saw the two of them, Mom and Maxim. They were standing and waving at me, and their faces were so miserable, as if I was leaving not for 3 years, but forever. Maybe they felt something, maybe they knew something I didn't. The plane took off. Leningrad, the Neva, the Golden Domes, my whole former life lay beneath me. I looked out the window and thought that I would return soon, that 3 years would fly by, that everything would be fine. I didn't know that I would never see that city again as it was, that when I returned in 8 years, I would be a completely different person. That Anna Gromova, a medical graduate, Maxim's bride, her mother's daughter, would die somewhere in the snows of Chukotka, and someone else would be born in her place. Magadan greeted me with gray skies and a cold wind, even though it was August. I transferred to a small into an old crop duster, which was flying further north to Anadar. There were 3 men in the cabin besides me, all in shabby quilted jackets, all silent. One asked where I was flying. I answered to Welwyn. He whistled. The girl had come a long way. There bears eat people. I thought he was joking, but his face showed he wasn't. It took another 3 days to get from Anadari to Yulin. First by truck along a bumpy road, then by helicopter, then by truck again. The driver of the last vehicle, a Chukcha named Rinton, barely spoke Russian, only nodded and pointed ahead. We drove across the tundra, flat, endless, gray-brown. No trees, only low bushes and rocks. The sky hung so low that it seemed you could reach out and touch it. Rinton suddenly said one word in Russian. "Winter is coming soon." And he laughed. I looked at the calendar. End of August, 3 months until winter. I didn't understand what he meant. I only understood a week later, when the first snow fell and didn't melt until June. Uelskum, a village of 20 wooden houses clinging to the rocky shore. The ocean on one side, the tundra on the other, the sky above, all of it gray, cold, and endless. The wind blew constantly, so strong it knocked you off your feet. I stepped out of the truck, suitcase in hand, and realized I'd entered hell. But that was only the first circle of hell. The rest awaited me. The hospital I was sent to was a wooden barracks with peeling paint. Inside, there were 2 rooms, one outpatient department, the other an inpatient department with 3 beds. Stove heating, kerosene lamps. Water was carried in buckets from a well. There were almost no medicines. The instruments were old, some rusty. The only doctor, Viktor Semyonovich, greeted me with a bottle of vodka in his hand. He was about 50 years old, his face red and swollen, his hands shaking. He'd worked here for 20 years, had long since become a drunk, and was waiting for a replacement so he could leave forever. "Girl, do you regret coming?" He laughed hoarsely. "Everyone feels sorry. The first year. Then they get used to it or go crazy. There's no third option." He showed me a room at the hospital, a small cubbyhole with an iron bed, a table, and a stove. "This is where you live. Ban once a week on Saturdays. There's one store. Groceries are delivered once a month, weather permitting. In winter, sometimes they don't deliver anything for 3 months. Stock up now while you can." I sat on this iron bed and looked 700 kilometers away across the tundra, which is inaccessible in winter. Viktor Semyonovich left after 3 weeks. He was granted early release due to health reasons. Before leaving, he gave me one last piece of advice. The Chukchi don't trust Russian doctors. They go to a shaman. To get them to come to you, you need to earn their respect. Save someone's life, and then they'll believe you. And if they don't, you can sit here in an empty hospital and talk about the benefits of Soviet medicine. He left. I was left completely alone. For the first week, there wasn't a single patient. I sat in the empty outpatient clinic, reading old medical journals and wondering why they sent me here in the first place. Then an old Chukchi woman came and showed me a swollen toe. I treated it and gave her antibiotics. She left silently, without a word of thanks. 2 days later, a man came with his son. The boy had a fever and a cold. I gave him antipyretics and vitamins. The man nodded and left. No one spoke to me. Everyone looked at me suspiciously. I started learning the Chukchi language. I bought a notebook at the store and wrote down the words I heard on the street. I tortured the saleswoman at the store, an elderly Russian woman named Zoya. She had lived here for 30 years and knew the language. Zoya laughed at me. "Why do you need it? You'll leave here in 3 years and forget about it anyway." But I stubbornly studied. I thought that if I understood their language, I would understand them too. September ended, October began. Snow fell in earnest. The temperature dropped to -20. For the first time in my life, I saw the northern lights. The green waves against the black sky were so beautiful that I wanted to cry. But the beauty here was cruel. The wind grew stronger, the frost more intense. I wore all my warm clothes at once, stoked the stove day and night, but I was still freezing. Letters from Mom and Maxim arrived a month late. Maxim wrote that he missed me, that he was waiting for me, that hang in there, darling, everything would be fine. Mom wrote about Leningrad news, the weather, the neighbors. Their letters seemed like messages from another life, from another world that existed somewhere far, far away, and with which I no longer had contact. I wrote back, lying that everything was fine, the work was interesting, the people were friendly, the nature was harsh but beautiful. I didn't want to upset them, but in reality, every day I thought about how to escape from there. I considered options. Maybe bribe one of the pilots to take me to Inadir. Maybe write a complaint to the Ministry of Health, citing illness. Maybe just walk across the tundra. But all these plans were crazy. The pilots wouldn't take me without documents. Complaints wouldn't help. The system doesn't forgive. And leaving on foot would mean certain death. You can't survive in the tundra in winter. I was trapped, and the only way out was to wait out 3 years, serve out the sentence like in prison. November brought the polar night. The sun sank below the horizon and didn't reappear until February. The darkness was total, thick, oppressive. I turn on the kerosene lamp in my closet and sit, watching the dancing flames, and I felt like I was going crazy. The silence was so thick it rang in my ears. The wind howled outside the window, as if alive. I talked to myself, so as not to forget the sound of a human voice. Depression covered me like a heavy blanket. I didn't want to get up in the morning, didn't want to eat, didn't want anything. I just lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought about suicide. There were medications at the hospital. I could give myself an injection, fall asleep, and never wake up. It seemed like a good way out, but I didn't do it. I don't know why. Maybe because of my mother, who wouldn't survive the death of her daughter. Maybe because of stubbornness. Maybe the fear of death was simply stronger than the fear of life. And then something happened that changed everything. One night, in mid-November, while I was sleeping in my little room, someone started pounding on the hospital door. Loudly, desperately, incessantly. I jumped up, threw on everything I had, and ran out. A Chukchi man stood at the threshold, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face. He spoke rapidly in his own language, gesturing toward a sled parked nearby. In the sled lay a boy of about 10, doubled over in pain. I immediately realized it was serious. I dragged the boy inside, laid him on the couch, and began examining him. The boy screamed when I palpated his abdomen. His right iliac region was tense and painful. His temperature was almost 40 degrees Celsius. Classic acute appendicitis, already showing signs of peritonitis. If I don't operate immediately, the child will die within a few hours. I looked at the boy's father. He needed surgery now, do you understand? The operation must be cut, removed, or he will die. He nodded, his eyes wide with fear. I realized he was willing to do anything as long as his son survived. And then I realized the full horror of the situation. I had never operated myself. I'd assisted at the institute, but to do it alone, without an experienced surgeon nearby, never. I have no assistant, no anesthesiologist, no proper equipment. I have an old surgical kit, some crooked instruments, a kerosene lamp, and a few vials of Nicaine for local anesthesia. And a boy who is dying right now. I washed my hands, disinfected everything I could, and laid the boy on the operating table. It was an ordinary couch with oilcloth. I gave him an injection of Nicaine instead of an incision. I waited for it to take effect. The boy whimpered. His father stood next to me, looking at me with such hope that I wanted to scream. You don't understand. I don't know how. I don't know. I'm afraid. But I picked up the scalpel. My hands were shaking. I clenched my teeth, forced myself to calm down. I remembered everything I'd studied. Anatomy, topography, surgical technique. I'd seen appendectomy procedures performed dozens of times. Now I had to do it myself. An incision. Blood. I pulled apart the tissue, looked for the cecum, found the appendix. It was inflamed, purple, swollen. A little more, and it would burst, and then peritonia, and then death. I applied clamps, cut off the appendix, bandaged the stump, and treated it. My hands moved on their own, as if someone else were operating on my hands. For hours. The operation took 4 hours. By the end, I could barely stand. My back ached, my eyes were watering from the strain and the smoke for the kerosene lamp. But I finished, put in stitches, treated the wound, gave an injection of antibiotics. The boy was sleeping, alive. I checked his pulse and breathing. Everything is fine. He will survive. I went out to my father and said one word in Chukchi that I had learned. Good. The man looked at me, and suddenly tears appeared in his eyes. He took my hand, stained with blood, and pressed it to his forehead. It was a gesture of gratitude, a gesture of deep respect. Then he said something in Chukchi, long and solemn. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. You saved my son. I am in your debt. Then he told me his name. Or a Natville, and asked. Mine. I answered, Anna. He tried to repeat it, but it came out as Anna. I smiled. Anna. Let it be Anna. The boy's name was Ainana, my future husband's namesake, although I didn't know it then. Ainana was in my hospital for a week. Every day, I changed the bandages, monitored his condition. The wound was healing well. The fever was going down. The boy was already smiling and trying to talk to me in a mixture of Russian and Chukchi. Tenant Vale came twice a day, bringing food, dried meat, some kind of fish that I couldn't identify, flatbreads. He spoke almost no Russian, but each time he put his hand to his heart and nodded to me. I understood that this was a sign of gratitude. When Ainana recovered, Tenant Vale took him away, but 2 days later he returned with gifts. He brought a seal skin, soft, beautiful. He brought walrus meat, a large piece wrapped in a cloth. He even brought a carved walrus ivory figurine, a small bear. He placed it all on the table in the outpatient clinic, said a few words in Chukchi, bowed, and left. Zoya, the saleswoman who sometimes came to see me, saw the gifts and whistled. You're something, girl. Do you know what this means? You're one of them now. You're a Natville from a respected clan, a hunter-gatherer. If he's noticed you, all the other Chukchi will treat you differently. You're no longer an outsider. And indeed, something changed. People started coming to my hospital. Old people with rheumatism, a woman with babies, children with colds. They were still afraid, still suspicious, but they came. I treated them as best I could, gave them medicine, did bandages, listened to their lungs with an old stethoscope, and each time I tried to learn a few more words in their language. Gradually, I began to understand Chukchi, not all of it, of course, but the basic words, simple phrases. I began to distinguish intonations and grasp the meaning. The Chukchi were surprised that a Russian doctor was trying to speak their language. Some laughed at me, but in a kind way. Some helped, corrected my pronunciation. You sometimes came to the dump, just like that, to check how I brought food, firewood for the stove. I understood that he considered himself responsible for me, since I saved his son. It was part of their culture, a system of mutual obligations, which I still poorly understood at the time. One day, he brought an old woman to my hospital. She was small, wrinkled, her face covered in wrinkles, like a geographical map. She was dressed in traditional fur clothing, a patterned scarf on her head. Tenant Vale said, "This is Emlanut, a shaman. She wants to see you." I invited them in. The old woman looked at me silently for a long time. Then she spoke slowly in broken Russian. "You saved the boy. Good. Are you learning our language? Good. You're not laughing at us? Good. Maybe you're a good Russian doctor? She took a leather pouch from her pocket, untied it, and poured some dried herbs onto the table. These are for headaches. You brew them, drink them, they help. I'm giving them to you. You can give them to people when you run out of pills. I took the herbs and thanked them, understanding that this was a sign of acceptance. The shaman was giving me his blessing to work with her people. This was important, maybe even more important than saving the boy. From that day on, my life in Yulin was different. I was still alone, still freezing in my closet, still homesick. But I had a purpose. These people needed me. I helped them, and they began to accept me. December, January, February dragged on slowly. Polar night, cold, wind, snowstorms. But now I worked every day, seeing patients, learning to recognize their illnesses, getting used to their mentality. The Chukchi were resilient. They didn't complain of pain, didn't show fear. They came when things were really bad. I had to learn to read their faces, their eyes, to guess what was wrong. I learned their culture. Zoya, in Oat Vale, told me about traditions, customs, how life is organized in the tundra. I listened, memorized, and learned that the Chukchi are divided into coastal and reindeer. The coastal Chukchi live on the coast, hunt walrus and seals, and roam the tundra with herds of reindeer. I learned about their religion, about spirits, about how they see the world. I was interested in this not just as ethnographic data, but as part of the reality in which I existed. I began to understand that Chukotka is not just cold and melancholy. It is something else, a world with different rules, with different beauty. But I still counted the days until the end of my 3-year sentence. I still wrote letters to Maxim, told him about my work, made plans for the future. He wrote that he was waiting for me, that everything would be fine, that I only had to endure for another 2 years. 2 years. It seemed like an eternity, but I believed that I would live to see it, serve my sentence, and return home. I didn't know that in a few months, everything would change, that Anna Gromova would cease to exist, and someone completely different would begin to be born in her place. March 1978. I had lived in Yulin for 8 months. Spring was just beginning, but the snow was still showing no signs of melting. The temperature was around -30. One morning, a man from the neighboring village of Lavrentia, 50 kilometers along the coast, came running to see me at the hospital. A flu epidemic had started there. Help was needed. Their paramedic had fallen ill himself. I packed my first aid bag and took the essentials: medicine, antipyretics, antibiotics. The district authorities sent a guide, a young Chukchi named Tylkyt. He spoke Russian better than most. He explained that we would travel by sled, a reindeer team, and the journey would take about 6 hours. The weather seemed to be holding, so we should make it before evening. I got into the sled for the first time in my life. Tylkyt harnessed the reindeer, cracked his whip, and off we went. At first, it was even exciting, the tundra, the snow, the speed. But after an hour, I began to freeze, even with all my warm clothes. The wind cut right through me. I wrapped myself in the reindeer skin Tylkyt gave me, but the cold still got to my bones. We rode along the coast. The ocean to the right, the tundra to the left. The sky was gray low. Mountains loomed somewhere in the distance. Telkit occasionally turned around. He checked. As I said, "It's fine, fine. We'll be there soon." But 3 hours later, the weather changed. The wind picked up, a sharp, gusty blow from the ocean. The sky darkened, became completely black. Snow began to fall, sparsely at first, then thicker. Telkit stopped the sled and looked around. I saw his face change. Alarm set in. A blizzard was starting. This was bad. We needed to turn around and head back. We turned around and headed back to Yulin, but the blizzard intensified. Half an hour later, nothing was visible. A white wall of snow. The wind was so strong it knocked the sleds off course. The reindeer began to worry, pulling in different directions. Telkit shouted at them, trying to maintain course, but I could see that he himself didn't know where we were going. Landmarks disappeared. Everything around was the same white. We drove for another hour or two. Darkness came quickly. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, polar winter. Now there was not only a white wall of snow, but also absolute darkness. Telkit stopped the reindeer and shouted to me, "We have to stop. Wait, we can't go on any longer." We jumped out of the sleds. Telkit began digging in the snow, making shelters. I helped as best I could, shoveling the snow away with my hands. The wind knocked us off our feet, and the snow clogged our eyes, mouths, and noses. We dug a hole, covered it with skins, and crawled inside. We huddled together for warmth. The blizzard lasted all night. We lay in this snowy hole, shivering from the cold. Telkit tried to cheer me up, saying, "It will clear in the morning, we'll find a road." But I heard uncertainty in his voice, saw fear in his eyes. Towards morning, the blizzard died down. We crawled out. The snow was waist deep. The sleds were completely covered. We found them with difficulty. We dug out the reindeer. One reindeer was dead, frozen, the others could barely stand. Tilky tried to determine the direction by the sun, but the sky was overcast. By the compass, but he had no compass. By the stars, but they were invisible. We were lost in the white desert, without landmarks, without a clue where we were. We went at random. Tilky chose the direction that seemed right to him. We rode all day. There was almost no food. We ran out of water. We ate snow. Towards evening, Tilky began to speak strangely, confusedly. I realized that he had frostbite, maybe hypothermia. He tried to lead the reindeer, but his hands did not obey. His head was shaking. By nightfall, he died, simply went silent, slid off the sled into the snow. I tried to wake him, shouted, shook him, but he did not respond. The dead man froze. I was left alone in the tundra at night in a blizzard, with a dead man, with half-dead reindeer, no food, no water, no idea where I was. Panic washed over me like a wave. I screamed into the void. No one heard. I started crying, but the tears instantly froze on my cheeks. I didn't know what to do. Go on. Where? Stay here. I'll freeze. Go back. Go back where? I don't know. Where are we? I tried to lead the reindeer, but they didn't listen. Without a backbone, they were useless. I didn't know how to control the team. They just stood there with their heads down. The second night in the tundra, I dug another snow hole, climbed in, covered myself with skins, lay there, shivering, thinking about death. I understood that this was the end. Tomorrow I wouldn't wake up. I'll freeze like the backbones. They'll find me in a month when the snow melts. Or they won't find me at all. I thought about my mother, about Maxim. They don't know yet that I'm missing. They'll find out in a few days when I don't return. They'll start looking. They'll find the sleds. They'll find the backs. They won't find me. They'll declare me missing. I thought about Leningrad, Nevsky Prospect, Palace Square, the White Knights. I thought about Maxim's face, his smile, how he kissed me goodbye at the airport. I thought about my mother, how she cried when she saw me off. Now she'll cry even harder. At the funeral, which will take place without a coffin. I didn't want to die. I'm 24 years old. My whole life is ahead of me. I want to go home, get married, have children, work as a doctor. I deserve this life. But Tundra didn't ask what I wanted. Tundra took me slowly, coldly, mercilessly. I closed my eyes and thought that this was the last time. I won't open them again, and that's even good. I won't feel myself freezing. I'll just fall asleep, and I won't wake up. But I woke up from the sound of voices. I opened my eyes, didn't immediately understand where I was. Faces were leaning over me, Chukchi faces, unfamiliar. A man, a woman, someone else. They were saying something in Chukotka, quickly, excitedly. Then they picked me up and carried me. I was delirious, didn't understand what was happening. Reality mixed with sleep. They put me somewhere warm, soft, covered me with skins, lots of skins, gave me something hot, salty to drink. I drank without thinking. Warmth spread through my body. My arms and legs began to ache. It was the pain of frostbite, but the pain meant that I was alive. I spent several days in oblivion, waking up, then falling into darkness again. I saw the faces of the Chukchi who were leaning over me, doing something, changing the bandages on my arms and legs, feeding me, giving me water. I heard voices, Chukchi speech, but I didn't understand the words. When I finally came to my senses, I found myself in Yerong, a traditional Chukchi dwelling. It was a large tent made of reindeer skins. Inside, it was warm from otsherniks, small lamps that burned on tool fat. People were sitting around, several families, adults, children. They looked at me with curiosity. An old man, the head of the family, came up to me and spoke in broken Russian. "Who are you? Where are you from?" I tried to answer, but my voice was hoarse, my throat was dry. "I'm a doctor. Izulina. We got lost. The guy died." The old man nodded. "We found you 3 days ago. You were almost dead. Now you're alive." "Good." I asked where I was. The old man explained that this was a herd of reindeer. A nomadic camp. They are reindeer herders. They roam the tundra. Now they are far from the coast, in the depths, somewhere in the mountains. It's about 10 days' journey to Yulin, to any village even further. I asked if they could take me back. The old man shook his head. "In the spring, when the snow melts, it's impossible now. Blizzards, cold, dangerous. You stay with us, we'll take you in the spring." I realized I had no choice. I was trapped, but this time the trap wasn't a hospital cubbyhole in Yulin, but a Chukchi herd rolling across the endless tundra. The old man's name was Erdvale. His family consisted of 3 generations, about 15 people in total. Grown-up sons with their wives and children, an old woman, a wife, and several grandchildren. They lived according to the old way of life, as their ancestors had lived for hundreds of years. They followed the reindeer, ate reindeer meat and fish, and wore clothes made of skins. They had almost no contact with the Soviet authorities. Occasionally, they would come to the village to trade something. But for most of the year, they were far from civilization. I was housed in one of the inner sections of the Urangi, fenced off with skins. They gave me warm, fur clothes. They fed me 3 times a day. Reindeer meat, boiled, dried, sometimes fish. They treated my frostbite with herbs and some ointments. My toes turned black. 2 toes on my right foot had to be amputated. I did it myself with my own medical instruments, which I kept in my bag. I cut it, clenching my teeth without anesthesia. The Chukchi watched, did not interfere. Afterwards, they nodded approvingly. "A strong woman," they said. Days, weeks passed. I gradually came to my senses physically, but psychologically, I understood that I had fallen into a trap. They are already looking for me in Yulin. They have probably found me. They found a reindeer in Telkita, but they haven't found me. They think I'm dead. In some time, they will declare me missing. Mom and Maxim will receive a funeral notice. I tried to explain to Erdvale that they are looking for me, that I needed to somehow let him know I was alive, but he didn't understand. He said, "We'll sort everything out in the spring. We'll take him away in the spring." And there were still 3 months until spring. 3 months in the tundra with the nomads, far from everything. I understood that by then I would be officially declared dead. And then what? How would I go back? How would I explain where I'd been? Would they believe me? But most importantly, I began to understand that maybe I didn't want to go back. The thought came unexpectedly, frightening. Anna Gromova, a medical school graduate, Maxim's fiancé, her mother's daughter, was thinking about not returning to civilization. Why? I didn't know myself. Maybe because there, in Yulin, I was still an outsider. Maybe because 3 years seemed like an eternity, and here time flows differently. Maybe because I was tired of that life, of obligations, of having to be someone I didn't want to be. Or maybe perhaps it was simply because here, in the tundra among these people, I felt alive for the first time in many months. March turned to April, April to May. The snow began to melt, but very slowly. The temperature rose to -10. This was considered warm weather. The herd moved north to the summer pastures, and I moved with them. For the first month, I was useless cargo. I sat in the orang, watching the Chukchi work. They rose early before dawn. The men went to the herd, checked the reindeer, looked for stragglers and the sick. The women cooked food, sewed clothes, mended the orangs. The children helped the adults. Even 5-year-olds had their responsibilities. Everyone worked without stopping. Idleness was an unaffordable luxury here. Erdvale's wife, old Tingnut, once came up to me and said in broken Russian, "You are strong, healthy. Why aren't you working?" I was confused. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how. She smiled. "We'll teach you." Everyone knew how once, some didn't. Then they learned. And she began to teach me, showed me how to butcher reindeer meat, how to cut correctly so as not to ruin the skin, how to scrape the skin so that it became soft, how to sew fur clothes with special threads from reindeer sinew, how to set up a arena. It was a whole science. The order of setting up the poles, the tension of the skins, everything was important. I learned slowly, clumsily. I cut my fingers with a knife, pricked myself with needles, dropped the grease lamps that gave off light. The Chukchi laughed at me, but not maliciously kindly. Russian women said that their hands were like a child's. But Tangniat was patient. She showed me again and again until I began to do it correctly. For the first time in my life, I worked with my hands. At the Institute, I studied anatomy, physiology, operative surgery. There, everything was theoretical, in books, in clean classrooms. Here, everything was real, in blood, in dirt, in the cold. And, strangely enough, I liked it. I felt like I was creating something real. Not just writing prescriptions, but making things that were necessary for survival. One of Urgitval, Ainana's sons, began teaching me other things. He was a young man of about 30, a strong, silent man. His wife had died 2 years ago. He had no children. He lived alone in his section of the Uranga, worked more than anyone else, spoke the least. Ainana showed me how to care for the reindeer. Reindeer are the life of the Chukchi reindeer herders. Everything depends on the herd. Food, clothing, shelter, transportation. Lose the herd, you die. Therefore, every reindeer counts. I learned to distinguish them. Each has its own character, its own peculiarities. I learned to approach them without frightening them. I learned throw on shot, lasso, to catch the right reindeer. I was bad at it. Ainana said little, but when he did, it was always to the point. You're afraid. Reindeers sense fear. Don't be afraid. They're not your enemies. I try not to be afraid, but the reindeers seemed big and unpredictable to me. And the smell of the herd was thick, animalistic. It took me a long time to get used to it. Gradually, the skills came. I learned to cook traditional Chukchi food, miniala, blood sausage made from reindeer intestines, kapalchin, fermented walrus meat buried in the ground for several months. The taste was terrible. I choked, but ate it because there was no other food. Over time, I got used to it, even began to find my own taste in this food. I learned to sew a kuklianka, a fur jacket. My first kuklianka was crooked, the seams came apart, but I was proud of it. I made it with my own hands from start to finish. I put it on and went out in the cold, and it warmed me just as well as the store-bought one. I learned how to set up a Uranga. The whole family wanted to do it, but now I participated just as much as everyone else. I carried heavy skins, set up poles, stretched the coverings. My back ached. My hands were worn to calluses, but by the end of the day, the Uranga was standing, and I knew that this was my work. I felt my body changing. My muscles became stronger. The fat disappeared. My skin became rough. My hands were covered with scars and calluses. My face was weathered, burned by the sun, which mercilessly bakes in the tundra in spring. I looked at my reflection in a piece of metal that was used as a mirror and didn't recognize myself. It wasn't Anna Gromova, a medical student. It was some other woman, tough, weathered, with an empty look. But I was alive and I survived. Somewhere in May, when the snow had almost melted and the tundra was covered with the first flowers, Urgitval called me over. He said that soon they would go to the village to exchange skins for food, ammunition, salt. You can come with us. Return to your people. I stood and said nothing. I should have been happy. This was a chance to return, to say that I was alive, to rebuild my life. But inside there was no joy. There was a strange indifference. I thought about what would happen if I went back. They've been looking for me for 3 months. Most likely, they've declared me dead. Maximum. They think I'm dead. They're grieving. If I go back, I'll have to explain where I've been. They won't understand. No one will understand why I didn't try to report myself earlier, why I lived with the nomads instead of looking for a way home. And most importantly, I didn't want to go back. It was the truth. Terrible, but true. I didn't want to go back to that life, to the hospital in Yulin, to loneliness, waiting for the end of a 3-year sentence. I didn't want to go back to Leningrad, to marry Maxim, to have children, to work in a clinic. It all seemed alien to me, distant, unnecessary. Here in the herd, I found something else. Unhappiness? No, that was too loud, but peace. Simplicity, a life without unnecessary questions. You wake up, work, eat, sleep. Tomorrow the same. No plans for the future, no ambitions, no obligations to society. Just you, Tundra, and the reindeer to V. I said to Erdval, I won't go. I'll stay here. He looked at me long and carefully, then nodded. Okay, then you'll stay. You're free. You choose for yourself. And I stayed. It was my conscious decision. I chose life in the herd, refused to return. In essence, I chose to die to the old world and be born in a new one. The summer of 1978 passed in endless work. We wandered across the tundra, following the reindeer that grazed on the summer pastures. The day lasted 24 hours. The sun never set. I got used to falling asleep by the light, waking up by the light. Time lost its meaning. The days merged into one extended present. Anana often worked next to me. We almost never spoke. He was not talkative, but some kind of silent understanding developed between us. He showed me how to track deer that had strayed from the herd, how to read tracks on the ground, understand how long a deer had been gone, in which direction, how to shoot a gun in case we encountered wolves or a bear. I learned to shoot. The first time I picked up a gun, I thought it was a weapon that it was used to kill. But Ainana said, "You're wasting your time. Or you're killed. Choose." I learned to shoot. Not very well, but enough to hit a large target. One day, we encountered wolves. The pack surrounded the herd. The men grabbed their guns and started shooting. I, too, shot at random out of fear. But one wolf fell, and I realized that I had hit it. I had killed a living creature. I should have felt horror, disgust, but I felt only relief. The wolf was dead. The deer were alive. We survived. That's how I was becoming. A person for whom killing an animal isn't a tragedy, but a necessity. By autumn, I was already a full-fledged member of the community, working alongside the women, sometimes helping the men. Ergetval treated me like a daughter. TNG taught me women's affairs. The children called me Anna. You couldn't pronounce Anna correctly. I responded to this name. I got used to it. Ainana began to show interest in me. Secretly. It's not customary for Chukchi to express feelings publicly, but I noticed. He worked tirelessly alongside me, brought me the best cuts of meat when they slaughtered a deer, mended my clothes when they were torn. Once he gave me a good knife, sharp with a carved bone handle. It was a sign of attention. I understood. I didn't know how to react. On the one hand, I was married. No, not married, but pros Van. My fiancé, Maxim. On the other hand, Maxim was far away in another world that no longer existed for me. I'm dead to him. He's dead to me. And Ainana is here, next to me, alive, real, strong. He doesn't say pretty words, doesn't give me flowers, doesn't take me to the movies, but he gives me food, protects me, teaches me to survive. In the world of the tundra, this is more than love, it's life. But I resisted. I still remembered who I was. Anna Gromova, Russian, educated from another world. I can't become a Chukchi's wife. It's absurd. It's a betrayal of everything I was. In the fall of 78, the herd moved again to the winter pastures. The days grew shorter, the nights longer. The temperature dropped. I prepared for a second winter in the tundra, now knowing what awaited me. One evening, when everyone was sitting around the fat tree in a ring, Ergetval said to me, "You've been with us for a year now. You've become one of us, but you're still alone. A woman shouldn't be alone. Ainana is a good man, strong, a provider. You want to marry him. Do you agree?" Everyone was looking at me. Tingunud, the children, the rest of the family. Ainana sat to the side, staring into the fire, but I saw how tense his body was. I should have refused. Said, "No, I can't. I'm from another world. I have another life." But the words wouldn't come, because I realized I didn't have another life. That life died in the blizzard along with Tilkit. Anna Gromova was dead. In her place, Anna was born, a woman from the Ergetvala herd. And this Anna had a choice, to remain alone or to accept Ainana's proposal. I looked at him. He looked up and met my gaze. There was no romance in his eyes, no passion. There was something else. Respect, acceptance, an offer of partnership in this harsh life. I nodded. I agreed. And so I became Chuk's wife. Without a marriage license, without documents, without a wedding dress. According to tradition, according to the laws of the tundra, which predate any Soviet laws, the wedding took place according to Chukchi customs. No registry office, no documents, no witnesses from the Soviet authorities. The family simply gathered in Ural. Urgitval gave a long speech in Chukchi. I only understood half of it, but the gist was clear. Inanna takes me as his wife. I become part of his clan. We are now one family. Inanna gave me a kuklianka coat. He sewed himself, a beautiful one, with an ornament. I gave him a knife, which I sharpened and decorated myself. I spent a week working on it. We exchanged gifts in front of everyone. It was a sign of agreement, a contract. Old Tingunud came up, tied a patterned scarf on my head, and said, "Now you are a wife. Now you are the mother of the future. Take care of your husband, have children, work hard." Then there was a celebration. They slaughtered the reindeer, cooked the meat, everyone ate it, and drank the fermented reindeer stomach, which was intoxicating. They sang songs in Chukotka and danced strange dances, imitating animals. The children ran and laughed. I sat next to Inanna, and everyone looked at us, smiling. I should have felt happy, but I felt only a strange emptiness. I was marrying a man I barely knew in a world that was alien to me. But there was no going back. I had made a choice. That night, we were alone in his section of Urange. Inanna was silent, as always. He didn't say beautiful words, didn't hug me romantically. He simply lay down next to me, put his hand on my shoulder, and said one word, "Sleep." I didn't sleep for a long time. I lay there, staring into the darkness, thinking about Maxim. I wondered what he was doing now. He must have already married someone else, since I was declared dead. Or was he still grieving? Does he remember me? I remember his face, but it no longer brings pain, only a distant sadness, like the memory of another life. The first months of marriage were strange. Inanna and I lived together, slept next to each other, worked together. But there was a wall between us, language, culture, and mentality. He didn't understand my world, and I didn't understand his. He was silent by nature, and I was silent because I didn't know what to say. Sex was mechanical, without passion. He came to me at night, silently, quickly, and then went to bed just as silently. I lay there afterwards and thought that this wasn't love. It was biology, the need to procreate, part of life in the herd. Love here isn't about kisses and hugs. Love is about him bringing me food, protecting me, teaching me how to survive. In the spring of 1979, the herd moved again to the summer pastures. The route passed near one of the villages, not Yulin, but also a coastal one, where the Russian Chukchi lived, where the Soviet government, shops, and a school were located. One morning, Urgitval said to me, "We're going to the village to trade skins for salt, ammunition, and flour. You can come with us and see the people." I agreed. I was curious to see civilization again after a year in the tundra. We walked all day, a small group of about 5 people. Me, Inanna, Urgitval, and his 2 sons. We carried seal skins, reindeer skins, and walrus ivory on sleds. The village was called Lavrentia. Wooden houses, a store, a school, a village council, a first aid station. Everything was gray and peeling. But for me, it was almost Moscow after a year in Ural. People wore ordinary clothes, quilted jackets, and quilted jackets. Children played in the courtyards. The smell of bread wafted from the store. We went inside. The saleswoman, a Russian woman of about 40, looked at us with the usual disdain that the Russians here had for the Chukchi. "What do you need?" Urgitval started bargaining, showing off the skins, asking for salt, flour, and bullets. I stood to the side, silent, afraid to open my mouth, afraid they'd recognize me. Although, who could recognize me here? I worked in Yulin, 50 kilometers away. No one had seen me here, and my appearance had changed. Now I look more Chukchi than Russian. My weathered face, my braids, my fur clothes, the smell of smoke and reindeer. But I was still afraid. Afraid someone would ask who I was, where I was from. Afraid I'd have to explain. And then what? They take me back to Yulin, to the hospital, force me to work as a doctor, and then take me away. A mystery. We left the store with a sack of flour, salt, and bullets. We were walking back through the village, and suddenly I saw the building of the first aid station. On it was a sign, slightly crooked, and on the wall next to it was a framed photograph under glass. A board of honor for local doctors. And there, among other photographs, I see my face. Anna Petrovna Gromova, a doctor at the Welland District Hospital, died in the line of duty in March 1978. She was posthumously awarded the Order for Labor Valor. A black frame surrounds the photograph. I stand and look at my face, young, smiling, with the photograph taken at the Institute. I look at myself dead. Inanna came up and looked at the board. Then he quietly asked me, "Is that you?" I nodded. Yes, it was me. He was silent for a long time, then said, "You're dead to them." Good, then they won't take you back. And I realized he was right. I am officially dead, buried in absentia. Mom received an order. Maxim probably got married. Everyone has forgotten me. Everyone lives on. And here I am, a meter from my photograph, alive but dead to the past. I should have felt horror, despair, but I felt only relief. The dead don't need to return. The dead are free of obligations. I'm dead to that world, so I can live in this one. We returned to the herd. I never went to the village again. I was afraid someone would find out, that questions would arise. I lived only with the herd, working, keeping silent about the past. Summer passed, autumn came. I noticed that my period had stopped. At first, I didn't pay attention. This is normal here. With heavy physical work and poor nutrition, the cycle is often disrupted. But then I started feeling sick in the mornings. My breasts were swollen and painful. I realized I was pregnant, said Tingoniad. The old woman was delighted and hugged me. Good. A child is good. Inanna will be happy. Inanna was genuinely happy. He didn't show it openly, but I could see it in his eyes because he became even more attentive to me, freed me from hard work, didn't let me carry heavy things, brought me the best food. Chukchi respect pregnant women. A child is the continuation of the family line. It's the most important thing. I should have been happy, but I was only worried. I would give birth here in Orang, without doctors, without a hospital, without medicine. If something goes wrong, I will die. The child will die. Inanna's wife died in childbirth. I remember Ergitval saying, "It's common here. Women die giving birth." The winter of 1980 was long and cold. I walked around with a huge belly, clumsy, slow, worked as much as I could, but tired quickly. Tinganet said, "Take care of yourself. Take care of the baby. You'll give birth soon. You have to be strong." The labor began in February, at night, as always happens. The contractions came suddenly, strong and sharp. I screamed, waking everyone up. The women immediately bustled about, preparing a place, skins, hot water. Tanganod stood next to me, directing. She had delivered babies dozens of times and knew what to do. I labored for 12 hours. The pain was such that I wanted to die. I screamed, tore at the skins with my teeth, scratched the ground with my nails. Tanganod held me, saying, "Breathe, calm down, just a little more, just a little more." Inanna sat behind a curtain, heard my screams, but couldn't enter. Men are not allowed in the wilds. Finally, the baby came out. I heard a cry, weak but alive. Tanganod picked it up and showed it to me. A girl, a healthy, strong girl. She placed the baby on my chest. I looked at the tiny face, wrinkled and red. The eyes were closed, the fists were clenched. My daughter, half Russian, half Chukchi. She was born in Urong, in the tundra, without documents, without a birth certificate, without a single entry in Soviet registries. Inanna came in, looked at his daughter, and smiled. It was the first time I had ever seen him smile. He said, "Let's name her Tinganud, after my grandmother. It's a good name, a strong one." I agreed. Tingnut, little Tingnut. I held her in my arms and cried. I cried from pain, from exhaustion, from the realization of what had just happened. I gave birth. I became a mother. In Yerong, at the edge of the world, in a world that had long forgotten my existence. The following months passed in a fog. Breastfeeding, sleepless nights, constant fatigue. Tingnut helped me, taught me how to care for a child the Chukchi way. They swaddled her not in cloth, swaddling clothes, but wrapped her in soft reindeer skins. They used moss instead of diapers. It absorbed the moisture. They carried the baby on their backs in a special bag made of animal skins. It was easier to work that way. I looked at my daughter and thought about how she would never see Leningrad. She wouldn't know that her mother had studied at the Institute, was a doctor, could have had a different life. For her, this is Uranga, this is the tundra, this is the herd, this is the whole world. She will grow up a Chukchi woman, marry a Chukchi man, have children, and wander the tundra her whole life. And who am I now? Anna Gromova is dead. She was buried, forgotten. Anna, Einan's wife, Tingnut's mother, is alive. But somewhere inside me, that girl from Leningrad still lives, and she screams, thrashes against the walls of this Uranga, wants to break free to return. But I can't go back. The way is closed. I am dead, and the dead do not return. A year later, my second child was born, Ainana's son natal. We named him after his father. The birth was easier. I already knew what to expect. The boy was large, healthy, and cried loudly. Ainana was proud. A son is the continuation of the family line, a future hunter. 2 years later, a third was born, another Gitlinut girl. 3 children in 4 years. I became a mother of many children, a nomad, a Chukchi. Russian began to fade. Chukchi became my main language. I thought in Chukchi, spoke in Chukchi, even counted in Chukchi. But at night, when everyone was asleep, I lay and remembered. Nevsky Prospect, the White Knights, the Hermitage, the university, the smell of coffee in the student cafeteria, my mother's voice, Maxim's smile. It all seemed like a dream, unreal, made up. Reality was the Uranga, the smell of deer, the cold, the wind, the cries of children, Ainana's silent presence nearby. I lived between 2 worlds, officially belonged to one. Internally, I remembered the other and was torn between them every day. 5 years have passed since the blizzard that killed Anna Gromova. 1983, I'm 31. 3 children, a Chukcha husband, life in a herd. I no longer thought about returning, no longer made plans to escape. This was my life, the only one I have. Tanganut grew into a serious girl, helped with the housework, babysat the younger ones. Ainanat Anatol was a tomboy, chasing deer, trying to shoot the bow that his grandfather made for him. Gitlud had just started walking, cheerful, loud, laughing all the time. Ainanat changed, not externally, but internally. He became softer, or something. Before, he was just a husband fulfilling his duties. Now he's become a father, and that's different. He took care of the children, taught Einatal to hunt, and carved bone toys for Gitlinyud. In the evenings, he sat next to me, silently, but it was a warm silence, not cold. One day, he told me, "You're a good wife. I'm glad you stayed." It was the longest declaration of love I'd ever heard from him. And you know what? It was enough. In the tundra, words mean little. Actions mean everything. And he did everything to keep me and the children alive, well-fed, and safe. I learned to love him not the way I loved Maxim. Not romantic, not passionate, but a different kind, deep, quiet, based on respect and shared life. We were partners, surviving together in a harsh world. And it was true love, stronger than romance. Old Ergitvold died that winter, quietly, in his sleep, as old people do. He was over 70, a ripe old age by local standards. We buried him according to Chukchi customs, in the tundra under a pile of stones. We placed his weapons, tobacco, and everything he might need in the afterlife nearby. Ainana became the head of the family. Now he decided where to migrate, when to slaughter reindeer, what to trade. The responsibility was enormous. Everyone's survival depended on his decisions. I saw him change, becoming more serious, more silent. Every decision was difficult. Tingnut, the old woman, was also weakening. She spent more and more time in the arena, working less. I took on her responsibilities, becoming the head woman in the family, managing the other women, distributing work, and monitoring the food supplies. This was power, but also enormous responsibility. If I miscalculated the supplies, the family would starve in the winter. If I misorganized the work, the arena would fall apart, clothes would tear, and people would freeze. Every mistake could cost lives. I coped. My medical training helped. I knew how to plan, count, and organize. The Chukchi respected me and obeyed me. Even the men asked my advice, which would have been unthinkable before. One day, a Chukchi from another clan came to our herd and said that people in their herd had fallen ill. They had a strange illness, fever, cough, and they were dying quickly. The shaman couldn't help, nor did the herbs. He had heard that we had a woman who used to be a Russian doctor. Maybe she could help. I took my old medical bag, which I had miraculously preserved all these years. It still contained some medicines and tools. I went with him to their herd. It was a day's journey. I examined the sick people and realized they had pneumonia, inflammation of the lungs. Without antibiotics, death is almost inevitable. I had a few ampoules of penicillin left, old ones. They might no longer be effective, but it was worth a try. I gave injections to the most seriously ill ones. I ordered the others to be isolated, given plenty of water, and kept warm. I returned a week later for a checkup. Those I'd given the injections to survived. The rest died. 5 out of 12. People from that herd brought a living reindeer and its hide as a gift. Inanna was proud of me, but I felt only bitterness. 5 people died because I didn't have enough medicine. In a normal hospital, they would all have survived. Here, in the tundra, medicine is powerless, but I continued to help when I could. I became not only a wife and mother, but also a healer for the surrounding communities. People came, asking for help. I treated them with what I could. Herbs, leftover medicine, knowledge. I didn't save everyone, but some. It gave me meaning. My 6 years of study and my diploma weren't in vain. Even here, at the edge of the world, my knowledge was useful. I'm still a doctor, just practicing in another world. The children grew up. Tinganot, at 8, already knew how to sew, cook, and care for babies. Inanna killed his first partridge with a bow. He brought it to his father, proud and with shining eyes. Gittelnod chattered madly, asking a million questions. She was everyone's favorite. I taught them Russian. I don't know why. I just wanted them to know their mother's language. They were reluctant, not understanding why, since everyone around them spoke Chukchi. But I insisted, and they learned. Simple words, phrases. Tinganet's mother once asked, "Why aren't you like the others? Why are your eyes round, while ours are narrow? Why is your skin light?" I told her the truth, that I came from another place, very far away, where there are big cities, lots of people, tall buildings. That I was a doctor, treating people, that I got caught in a blizzard and got lost. Grandfather Ergitval saved me, and I stayed here. She listened, her eyes wide, and asked, "Do you want to go back there?" I was silent for a long time, then answered honestly, "I don't know. I wanted it before, but now I don't." "Here you are, Dad, Grandma," the herd. "This is my home now." She hugged me. "It's good that you stayed. I love you, Mom." And at that moment, I realized that I was truly at home, not in Leningrad, which had long forgotten about me. Here, in Yerong, with the children, with my husband, with the herd. Anna Gromova was dead. In her place, Anna, Einan's wife, was born. And Anna was happy as one can be in the harsh tundra. 1984 brought changes. Rumors reached us that there was a new Dinsek Chernenko in Moscow, that reforms were beginning in the country, that indigenous peoples were being given more rights. But this didn't concern us. We were outside the system, outside the state, living by our own laws. One summer, Russians came to our herd, neither military nor officials, ethnographers. Young scientists from Leningrad were studying the culture Chukchi, wrote down legends, took photographs. They arrived with a guide with permission from the district authorities. I hid in the arena when they showed up. I was afraid they would find out and start asking questions. But they were enthusiastically asking Einan about the reindeer, about customs, photographing the orangas, recording the songs of old women. One of them, a young guy with glasses, looked into our arena. "Excuse me, may I? We're doing a project on the customs of nomads." I nodded silently. He entered, looked around the interior, took photographs, then looked at me more closely. "It's strange. Your facial features are not quite typically Chukchi. Are you a Mesti?" I answered in broken Russian. "Yes, a Mestiza. My father was Russian." He nodded, lost interest, and left. I exhaled. I was over it. But in the evening, when the ethnographers had already left, I thought about that guy. He was from Leningrad, Maybe studying at the same university where I studied. Maybe he walks the same streets I walked 11 years ago. This world still exists, lives, develops, just without me. I felt sad. Not sorry, not hurt, just sad, as from the loss of something important that can no longer be returned. But the children came running. Gitlanu demanded that I tell a story. Aina Nadal boasted that he hit a tree with a bough from 10 steps. Tengnut helped prepare dinner, serious, mature beyond her years. I looked at them and understood. I have not lost my old life. I traded it for another. And this other life has value, meaning, love. I was home, finally home. 1984, August. We were migrating along our usual route when we saw a helicopter. It was flying low, circling over the tundra, clearly looking for something. Then it began to land not far from our herd. Aina became wary. Helicopters are rare here. Usually they only fly if something's serious. We want to see what was going on. People in uniform jumped out of the helicopter. Military, policemen, some in civilian clothes. They were walking towards a herd, and I felt everything inside me tighten. Something was wrong. Something very wrong. A senior officer with the rank of major approached Einan and asked in Russian, "Are you the head of this herd?" Einan nodded. "I am the head. What do you need?" The major took out a paper and read it out. "A census is being conducted. Registration of all citizens living in the Chukotka Autonomous Okrug. You are required to provide lists of all members of your family, including women and children." Ainana shrugged. "Okay, how many people do you need?" The major started writing down names. Men, women, children. He reached me. Name, age, nationality. I was standing to the side. I never went to the village. He frowned. "That's a problem. Without documents, you don't exist officially. You need to get a passport, a residence permit." Ainana intervened. "She's my wife. She's lived in the herd all her life. Why does she need a passport? We don't go to the village. We don't need documents." The major shook his head. "The law is the law. All citizens of the USSR are required to have a passport. She must go to the district center, get the documents." I felt panic. Going to the district center would mean entering the system. The questions and checks would begin. Who am I? Where am I from? Why are there no documents? They'd find old records about the missing Dr. Gromova, compare the facts, and that would be at the end of my new life. But a man in civilian clothes intervened. A young KGB lieutenant, as it turned out later. He had been standing to the side the whole time, silent, but now he came closer and looked at me intently. "Interesting," he said. "The woman claims to be Chukchi, but her facial features are Caucasian. The shape of her eyes is atypical, and her Russian, although with an accent, is not like that of the indigenous people. More like that of a person who hasn't spoken Russian for a long time, but knows it well." The major was surprised. "What are you talking about?" The lieutenant took out a notebook and leafed through it. In 1978, Anna Petrovna Gromova, a doctor from Yulin, went missing in this area. 24 years old, European appearance, medical education. She was declared dead, but her body was never found. And now we see a woman of about the same age, European-looking, clearly educated, living with the nomads. Isn't that strange? The major looked at me differently. "Is this true? Are you that Gromova?" I wanted to refuse, saying, "No, you're mistaken." But Ainana grabbed my arm. Tightly, almost painfully, he said firmly, "She's my wife, and she's no Gromova. You're mistaken." The lieutenant chuckled. "Then she won't object to a check. We'll go to the district center, take fingerprints, check them against the archives. If she really is a Chukchi without documents, we'll issue a passport and let her go. If she's the missing doctor, that's a different matter." I understood I was trapped. The fingerprints would prove who I was. This whole new life would collapse in an instant. I'd be returned to the system in Leningrad, to my mother, to the past I buried. Ainona understood the same thing and said, "She's not going anywhere. She's my wife, the mother of my children. You have no right to take her away." The lieutenant replied coldly, We have every right. If she is a citizen of the USSR, hiding from the state, this is evasion of labor service, possibly desertion. She is obliged to return and report. A long squabble began. Aina shouted and threatened. The major tried to calm me down. The lieutenant stood calm, confident, knowing that the law was on his side. In the end, they took me away, put me in a helicopter, despite my resistance. Aina tried to interfere. They pushed him away. The children cried, clung to me. They tore them away. Tinjanut screamed, Mom, don't go. I sat in the helicopter, looking out the window at the retreating herd, at the small figure of Ainan, who stood and watched after them. I understood that I might never see them again. In the regional center of Anadar, they took me to the police station, took my fingerprints, photographed me, interrogated me. I remained silent, refused to answer questions, spoke only Chukchi, pretended not to understand Russian. But the fingerprint check yielded results in 2 days. Anna Petrovna Gromova, a doctor, went missing in March 1978. Officially declared dead, posthumously awarded an order. The interrogations began. Why didn't you return? Why didn't you report yourself? Where have you been all these years? What have you been doing? I answered through clenched teeth, got caught in a blizzard. The Chukchi saved me. I lost my memory. When my memory returned, it was too late. I was declared dead. I stayed with them, got married, had children, didn't want to go back. The investigator, an elderly major with tired eyes, shook his head. Gromova, do you understand the seriousness of the situation? You evaded labor service for 7 years. This is a crime. You can be held accountable. I asked, what kind of responsibility? I was declared dead. Legally, I don't exist. The dead can't evade labor service. He paused. You're right. This is a complicated case. We need to contact Moscow, the Ministry of Health, and sort this out. I spent a week in police custody. Not a cell, but not freedom either. A room for 2, with another detainee. A bunk, a table, a barred window. Meals 3 times a day, interrogations every day. The investigator tried to understand my motivation. Gromova, your mother is at home. She thought you were dead for 7 years. Do you understand what she had to endure? And you were alive and well, but you didn't bother to tell her? I remained silent. How can I explain that the Anna my mother was waiting for has died? That I am a different person with a different life, different attachments? He continued. And your fiancé, Maxim, remember, he waited a year, then married someone else. He now has 2 children, but he asked about you for a long time, hoping that they would find you. And all this time you lived as Chukchi and kept silent. Every word hit like a blow. I imagined my mother's face when she was told of my death. I imagined how Maxim waited, hoped, then resigned himself, started a new life. I caused him so much pain, and still I didn't want to go back. Finally, a decision came from Moscow. Anna Petrovna Gromova was to be reinstated in the list of living. The posthumous award was to be annulled. New documents were to be issued, and a 6-month health leave was to be granted, after which she was obliged to return to work in her specialty. The investigator read me this decision and said, You were lucky. They could have put you on trial, but they took into account the extreme circumstances, memory loss, isolation. You are free. You can return to your family in Leningrad. I asked, What about my husband? My children? He shrugged. The marriage, unregistered, does not legally exist. You can take your children with you or leave them with their father. It's your choice. I felt the ground slipping out from under my feet. This means that everything I've built over these years has no legal force. Ainana is not my husband, but a cohabitant. The children are not registered. Officially, I am fatherless. My life in the herd is a fiction, an illusion. Reality is Soviet documents, laws, the system. I said, I want to return to them, to the herd, to my husband, to the children. This is my life now. The investigator shook his head. Gromova, be realistic. You won't be able to live there. You have no status, no registration in the tundra. You are obliged to work, to report. The system will not let you go just like that. But I stubbornly repeated, I want to go to them. I don't want to go to Leningrad. Let me go. We argued for a long time. In the end, we agreed on a compromise. I would go to Leningrad for a month, meet with my mother, and settle the formalities. Then, if I still insisted, they would allow me to return to Chukotka, but to work as a doctor officially with a salary with deductions. I agreed. I had to agree, otherwise they would not have let me go at all. 2 days later, they put me on a plane to Moscow. I flew and looked out the window at the tundra receding below. Somewhere out there were the Ainana, the children, the herd, my family, my home. And I was flying to another world, alien, forgotten. I didn't know then that the choice still had to be made. The most difficult choice in my life. Leningrad greeted me with rain and a gray sky. October, 84 hours the city seemed huge, noisy, alien to me. Cars, trolley buses, crowds of people. I stood on the platform of the Moscow train station with a small suitcase in my hand, and not I recognized this city. 7 years ago it was my home, and now it seemed like an alien world. I knew the address by heart. I took the metro, got off at the right station, and walked along the familiar streets. Everything had changed and not changed at the same time. The same houses, the same courtyards, but somehow different. Or was I different? I approached the entrance, went up to the 4th floor, stood in front of the door, gathered my courage, and pressed the doorbell. Mom opened the door, aged, gray-haired, hunched over. She looked at me and didn't recognize me. "Who do you want?" I said, "Quiet, Mom. It's me, Anya." She looked at me for a long time without blinking. Then her face distorted. She clutched her heart and began to sag. I picked her up, helped her to the room, laid her down on the sofa, brought water, Volidol, and what I found in the first aid kit. Mom drank the water, looked at me. My face tears were flowing. "Anya, is it really you or am I imagining it?" I took her hand and squeezed it. "It's me, Mommy. I'm alive. I'm back." She was crying, stroking my face, hair, hands, as if checking if I was real. She hissed, "How could this happen? How could this happen? You were buried. 7 years. 7 years. I thought you were dead." I cried too. I saw how she had aged, how she had changed. She used to be energetic, cheerful, now broken, sick. I did this to her. I killed her with grief. We talked all night. I told her my story. The blizzard, the rescue, life in the herd, husband, children. Mom listened, shook her head, did not understand. "How could you, Anya? How could you not tell me that you were alive?" I was dying of grief. I tried to explain, but the words would not come. How can I explain that I didn't want to go back, that life was alien to me, that I found myself there in the tundra and not here in the city? Mom asked, "What now? Will you stay here?" I was silent, not knowing what to answer. I saw hope in her eyes. I saw how she was waiting for me to say, "Yes, I will stay. Everything will be like before." But I couldn't say it because I didn't want to stay. The next day, Maxim came. Mom called him and told him that I was alive, that I had returned. He rushed over an hour later, burst into the apartment, stopped when he saw me. I looked at him and almost didn't recognize him. He had aged, gained weight, gone a little bald. There was weariness and ordinariness in his eyes. An ordinary middle-aged Soviet man, an engineer, a husband, a father of 2. "Anya," he said, "God, is it really you?" We sat at the table, drank tea, talked. He talked about his life, about his wife Ludmila, about his children, a son and a daughter. He said he waited for me for a year, hoping they would find me. Then he resigned himself to it and got married. Life went on. I told him my story. He listened, frowning, not understanding. "How could you marry a Chukchi? How could you live in such savagery? You're an educated woman, a doctor." I tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. For him, it was absurd, a betrayal of everything a Russian woman should be. At the end of the conversation, he said, "Anya, I still love you. If you want, I will divorce Ludmila. We will start all over again. I did not leave you then, and I will not leave you now." I looked at him and realized that I did not love him. Maybe I loved him once 7 years ago, but the Anya who loved Maxim died in a blizzard. I am different, and love is different for another person in another world. I said, "Thank you, Maxim, but no, I can't. I have a family there, children, a husband. This is my life now." He did not understand, was offended, left, slamming the door. Mom cried, said, "Anya, are you crazy? You are giving up a normal life for the savages in the tundra." I was silent. I could not explain. A month in Leningrad was torture. I walked the streets, looked at people at the shops, at this whole urban anthill, and felt like an outsider. This wasn't my world. My world is where the wind, the tundra, the scent of reindeer, and Ainan's silent presence are nearby. I filled out the paperwork, got my passport and registration renewed. I went to the Ministry of Health, explained the situation, and asked for permission to return to Chukotka and work as a doctor there. The officials shook their heads. Gromova, you understand, this is irrational. You're a highly qualified specialist. Why do you need the tundra? We can get you a job in a good hospital here in Leningrad. I stubbornly insisted. I want to go there, only there. In the end, we came to an agreement. I will be given a doctor's position in Yelena with a salary and official employment, but the children must stay here in the boarding school to receive an education. My husband can come if he receives permission to leave the tundra. But it's difficult. Indigenous peoples are rarely allowed to settle permanently. I refused. I can't leave the children. I can't be separated from them. The official shrugged. Then choose. Children with an education in the city or children in the tundra without a future. It's up to you. I returned home to my mother, sat in the kitchen, and cried. An impossible choice. Children or husband, civilization or tundra, past or present. My mother said softly, Anya, I understand it's hard for you, but think about the children. They are half-breeds. They have no future in the tundra. Here they will get an education, a profession, a normal life. I asked, what about Inanna? Will he be alone? My mother sighed. Anya, he is a Chukchi. He will find another wife. This is how they live. This is their culture. And you can't spend your whole life in Yerong. You are a doctor. You have a calling. I thought for 3 days, didn't eat, didn't sleep, only thought. I imagined Timganud, Inanatal, Gitlud here in the city. How will they go to school? Wear regular clothes? Speak Russian. How they'll forget Chukotka, forget the tundra, forget their father, become city kids, maybe learn a profession, but lose their roots. I imagine myself here in Leningrad, without them, without the Einan, working as a doctor, living with my mother, growing old in this gray city, safe, stable, right, but empty. And then I imagine myself there, in the herd, with the children, with my husband, with Arana. Cold, difficult, dangerous, but alive. On the 4th day, I made a decision. I came to my mother and said, I'm going back there to them. This is my home. This is my family. My mother burst into tears, begged me to stay, screamed that I was abandoning her again, that she wouldn't survive a second time. But I was firm. My mother said, I love you, but I can't live here. I'm not the Anya you remember. She died. I'm different, and my life is there. She didn't understand, didn't forgive me, turned away, said, go, since she decided. Just know, I'm not waiting for you a second time. It was painful, but I couldn't do otherwise. I left Leningrad in November. My mother didn't come to see me off. I stood alone at the station with a suitcase, with a plane ticket to Anadar. I looked at the city and said goodbye for the last time. I knew I wouldn't come back. Anna Gromova was leaving forever, and Anna, Einan's wife, was returning home. The plane landed in Anadar at the beginning of December. Winter the weather has come into its own. It's 30 minutes, windy, a blizzard. I stepped off the plane and breathed in the cold air, smelling of snow and sea. I felt something inside me relax. I'm home. It took a week to get from the tundra to the herd, by helicopter to the nearest village, then by reindeer with a guide who agreed to take me for money. He looked at me strangely when I told him where to go. A Russian woman alone in the tundra, a nomad, asked, Who are you there? A relative? I answered, My wife, the mother of 3 children. He nodded and didn't ask any more questions. We found the herd on the 3rd day. I saw the Orangi from afar, the smoke from the millstones. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it would jump out. We rode closer. People were getting out, looking, recognizing me. Inanna was the last one out, standing, looking without moving. I jumped off the sled, ran to him, and stopped a step away. We looked at each other in silence. Then he said one word, returned. I nodded, returned forever. He hugged me tightly, silently. For the first time in all those years, he hugged me like that. I clung to him. crying into his fur coat. The children came running, shouting, "Mama, Mama, you're back." They all hugged me together, kissed me, touched me, checking if I was real. Tengenad was crying. Anan Anatol was holding up well, but his lips were trembling. Gitlet didn't let go of my hand. That evening, the whole family sat in Yerong. I told them where I'd been, what I'd seen, talked about the big city, the tall buildings, the cars, the shops. The children listened, their eyes wide. For them, these were fairy tales, fantasies, an unreal world. Ainana asked, "Could you have stayed there? Why did you come back?" I answered honestly, "Because it's not my home. My home is here with you." He nodded, understanding. Old Tnyut, who had become quite decrepit over these months, patted my hand. "It's good that you're back. A family without a mother is not a family." I officially got a job as a doctor in Yulin. Once a month, I went to the village for a few days, saw patients, filled out paperwork, and received a salary. The rest of the time I spent with my family at the herd. It was a strange, divided life. On the one hand, I was a Soviet doctor with paperwork, a salary, and reports. On the other, I was the wife of a nomad, a mother of many children, living in a rang without electricity or running water. But I learned to combine both. In the morning, I could operate on appendicitis in the hospital. In the evening, butcher a reindeer in the tundra. During the day, fill out medical records. And at night, sew fur clothes by the light of a grease lamp. The years passed. The children grew up, matured. Tengniat turned into a beautiful girl, learned all the women's work. At 15, she married a guy from a neighboring herd and moved in with him. I cried when I saw her off, but I knew it was right. It's their custom. Anatol became a hunter, strong and skilled. At 17, he killed his first bear. Everyone celebrated. He became a man, then got married, and brought a wife to our herd. I became his mother-in-law. It was strange. I was only 37. Gittelnut turned out to be the smartest of the children. She learned Russian better than anyone else, reading the books I brought from the village. At 14, my mother asked me, "Can I continue studying?" Not in the tundra, in the city. I looked at her and saw myself at her age. Ambitious, curious, thirsty for knowledge. I realized that I could not deny her the chance that I had. I made a deal with the authorities and arranged for the Gitlinut to go to a boarding school in the regional center. She went away to study, then entered a pedagogical institute, became a teacher, worked with children of indigenous peoples, helped them adapt to the Soviet education system. I was proud of her. She took the best of both worlds, mine and Ainan's. 1985 brought changes. Gorbachev came to power in Moscow. Talk began of perestroika, glasnost, new thinking. This news reached us with a delay from the newspapers, from conversations of visitors. But it felt like something was changing in the country. Indigenous peoples began to be given more rights, more autonomy. The Chukchi received official recognition of their traditions and culture. The nomadic way of life was no longer considered backward, began to be viewed as a national treasure. Ainona once said, "Maybe soon they'll leave us alone. They won't force us to live in villages, go to schools, or work on collective farms. Maybe they'll let us live like our grandfathers did." I hoped it would be so, but deep down I knew the system wouldn't let you go so easily, even during perestroika. Old Tingnut died in the winter of 1986. Quietly, in her sleep like old people die, we buried her next to Ergit Vol, under a pile of stones in the tundra. Ainona cried. I saw his tears for the first time. He loved his mother, respected her, and obeyed her all his life. I was now the eldest woman in the family. It was a responsibility, but also respect. People came to me for advice, for help. Young women from other social classes asked how to treat children, how to deliver babies, how to prepare medicines and herbs. I shared my knowledge, taught them, understanding that it was important to pass on experience, to help them survive in the harsh world of the tundra. 1990 brought the collapse of the system. The Soviet Union was falling apart. Nationalist movements began in the republics. In the cities, there were shortages and queues. Chukotka remained untouched by these upheavals. Here, life went on as usual. Reindeer grazed, people migrated, winter gave way to summer. But even here, changes were felt. People began to transport food to the villages. Stores emptied, hospitals closed. There was a shortage of medicine and equipment. I worked as a doctor in Yulin and saw everything falling apart. In 1991, the Soviet Union officially collapsed. I heard the news on the radio in the hospital. I stood there in disbelief. The country in which I was born, studied, and lived ceased to exist. Now Russia, a new state, new laws. My mother died that same year. They sent me a laconic telegram. Your mother has passed away. The funeral took place. I couldn't come. I didn't have time. I sat in Yerong, holding the telegram in my hands, crying. My mother died without ever forgiving me for choosing a different life. I didn't say goodbye to her, didn't tell her I loved her, didn't explain again why. I chose the tundra. Ainana sat next to me, silent, holding my hand. He didn't fully understand my pain. For Chukchi, death is a natural transition, not a tragedy. But he was there, and that helped. The 90s were difficult. The Russian economy collapsed. Benefits and salaries weren't paid for months. I worked as a doctor in Yulin practically for free, for the sake of an idea, for the sake of helping people. But life in the herd went on. We survived, as we had for centuries. The reindeer provided meat, skins, and transportation. Hunting provided furs that could be traded. The sea provided fish, walruses, and seals. We didn't depend on the state, on stores, on money. We depended only on nature and on our labor. In 2007, Ainana died unexpectedly of a heart attack. In the evening, he was sitting by the oil burner, cutting something from a bone, when he suddenly clutched his chest and fell. I rushed to him, trying to resuscitate him. I did heart massage and artificial respiration. But it was too late. The heart stopped and wouldn't start. He died in my arms, looking into my eyes. The last thing Anna said was, "Take care of the children." I nodded, cried, and promised. We buried him next to his parents, under stones in the tundra. I stood by the grave, looking at the gray sky, at the endless tundra, and understood that I was alone. The children were grown up and living with their own families, but Ina was dead. Mom was dead. Maxim was probably also somewhere out there, in another world, living his own life. I was alone in the tundra, in Yerong, at the edge of the world. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel lonely. I felt a home. It's 2012 now. I'm 60. I'm a grandmother of 7 grandchildren. I live in a herd, which is now led by Aina Ananata Nadal, my son. He's a good leader, wise, fair. The herd lives, rocks, survives. I still work as a doctor, taking IC patients in the village once a month. I can no longer perform complex surgeries. My hands shake, my eyesight is failing, but I consult, give advice, and help as much as I can. Recently, journalists from Moscow came to do a report on the lives of the indigenous peoples of Chukotka, learn my story, and ask for an interview. I told them everything openly about how I came to be here, how I stayed, and how I chose this life. One of the journalists asked, "Do you regret your choice?" I was silent for a long time, then answered honestly, "I regret hurting my mother, Maxim, and everyone who loved me in my previous life. I regret not being able to explain to them why I chose the tundra. But I don't regret the life I lived here. This life was real, full, and meaningful. People needed me. I raised my children. I found love, albeit a strange one. I survived, and that's the main achievement in the tundra." The journalist wrote it down, nodded, and asked again what you would say to young doctors currently being assigned to remote regions. I thought about it and said, don't run from difficulties. Sometimes the most difficult place becomes home. Sometimes losing your old life is finding a new one. Don't be afraid to choose your path, even if it seems crazy to others. They left, taking my story with them. I don't know if they'll write about it or show it on television. It's not that important. What matters is that I'm here in the tundra at the edge of the world in my Uranga. My grandchildren will soon return from boarding school for the holidays. Gitlanut promised to come with her husband and daughters. Tengnut will send a message from herself. I'm sitting by the oil lamp, watching the dancing flames, listening to the wind outside the Uranga walls, drinking tea with reindeer milk, chewing dried meat. A simple life, harsh but mine. Where's my home? I've been asked this many times over the years. Now I know the answer. Exactly, without a doubt. My home is where I chose to be. Where are my children, my grandchildren, the memory of my husband, whom I loved in my own way? Where is the tundra, the wind, the scent of reindeer, the cold and freedom? My home is not a place on a map. My home is myself. Anna Gromova, who died in Porga 34 years ago. Anna, Einan's wife, who was born in the same Porga and is still alive. I survived, went through the hell of choice, the pain of loss, years of doubt, but I survived and found my true self. I am home, finally home.